Young people represent more than 30% of the European population, and about half of the Asian citizens are under 30 years old. They are the leaders of the future, and even of the present. Their opinions and actions will be vital to enhance the cooperation between the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and the European Union. February the 26th saw the first ever EU-ASEAN Young Leaders Forum, giving these young delegates the chance to make their voices heard and to put forward their proposals for the future.
I believe that this is important in order to foster even more dialogue between the two regions, and in order especially to bring young people who are the future of both of these regions and the world in general. So I think this is the main point in order to bring us all together.
The participants discussed topics as diverse as non-traditional security challenges, trade and economic relations, people-to-people contacts, and the need to find a more sustainable way of life.
From the Young Leaders Forum, I definitely take away that we're very interested in sustainability. Well, everyone, for the solutions that they put forward, wanted to highlight that these work for decades to come, because I think we're very aware that quick fixes and unsustainable behaviours just create problems down the road, and we're going to be dealing with them.
After the debate, the young leaders worked in groups to present recommendations on how to build up a stronger partnership between the EU and ASEAN. These recommendations went from the need to find better ways to face digitalization through fostering better connection between people from both regions.
I think there were very good suggestions in terms of how to enhance people-to-people relations, how to foster education program, for example, how to exchange experiences between the two, but also in issues such as the security and political issues that usually are a bit more complicated to discuss. There were also very, very good suggestions.
The following day, the young leaders had the opportunity to meet with the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Federica Mogherini. She highlighted the potential of young people in shaping the partnership between the EU and ASEAN and invited them to embrace their role of young leaders.
If they wish, they can elect every officials from the top up to the lowest political unit. The future is in their hands. They only need to stop looking at their equipment, their iPhones, etc., and just participate in the architecturing of their future.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the launch of the EU-ASEAN Young Leaders Forum. Thank you for joining us from across Europe and across Asia. And a special warm welcome to the 90 youth delegates who are participating in this meeting. I'm Shada Islam. I'm an independent EU commentator and analyst based in Brussels, and I'm delighted to be moderating this conference Before we kick off our conversation today, to make things more interactive, we're going to be using Slido. We all know how to use it, but please either scan the QR code on the screen or connect to slido.com and be ready to answer our first question. Very simple. How are you feeling today? How are you feeling today? We'll show your answers in a minute. Before that, let me share a bit of background with you. Both ASEAN and the European Union have marked 2022 this year as the year of youth. This year is also the year that ASEAN and the EU are commemorating their 45th anniversary of this very multifaceted and very active partnership. What we are hoping today is to ensure that young people from ASEAN and from the European Union can become a part and parcel of this very important dialogue. So we want to know, how do you, young people, feel about this partnership? What are your hopes and what are your recommendations for the future? We hope to get some answers today, but more also later on in this year. Now, this Young Leaders Forum is a collaborative effort between many, many partners. We have, of course, the European Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. We have the College of Europe, the Asia Vision Institute, the ASEAN Foundation, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and New Horizons Project, which is my company. After this launch event, the Young Leaders Forum will meet again in October this year to go further and deeper into this conversation, this ASEAN-EU partnership. Today, we have an exciting program for all of us. Opening remarks will be made by His Excellency Igor Driesmans, who is the EU's ambassador to ASEAN and recently also appointed EU envoy on Myanmar. He will take the floor first. And then this will be followed by His Excellency Dato Jock, Hwee, who is the Secretary General of ASEAN. We're also delighted that Ms. Federica Mogherini, who is the Rector of the College of Europe, will then make a keynote address. After that, we have a panel discussion on how youth involvement will change and perhaps improve this ASEAN-EU relationship. Now, before we start this exciting agenda, some housekeeping rules for you. So, of course, you know this, all participants, please turn off your microphones. We will take questions from the floor. There will be Slido questions, but after the panel discussion, we'll also be taking questions from the floor. Please leave your questions in the chat box on the screen, or if you're following us on Facebook, please put your questions in the comment box. And I will try and make sure that I get the panelists to answer at least some of your queries. Now, let's look at the results of the first Slido question. How are you feeling today? Let's see how you're feeling today. Ooh, excited, happy, good, great, very good, excited and happy. This is amazing. Oh, I like this. Quite buzzed, brilliant, curious, very good, excited and attentive, inspired, marvelous, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. This is exciting. I'm very happy and excited also to be here with all of you and to be moderating this fantastic conversation today on EU-ASEAN Relations, the Young Leaders Forum. Now let's launch the second Slido question. Let's launch this question, and this question is very simple also. We are curious as well, and we want to know, which city are you joining us from? So we'll get results of this second Slido question in a few minutes. Which city are you joining us from? But it's now my great pleasure and my privilege to give the floor, give the screen to Ambassador Igor Driesmans. Excellency, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Shara, and let me greet His Excellency Dato Jock, Secretary General of ASEAN, Federica Mogherini, Director of the College of Europe, Hwee, Director of the European Union Center in Singapore, and of course, an authority on EU-ASEAN, and our two young leaders, Julia Terkovic and Arum Harahap. Very warm welcome to all of you and to the audience who came in great numbers today for this kickoff meeting of the EU-ASEAN Young Leaders Forum. The forum, as you said, organized with the ASEAN Secretariat, the College of Europe, ASEAN Foundation, and CAS. Thanks to all of you, and of course, my sincere appreciation and congratulations to the 90 young leaders who were selected from the EU, from ASEAN, but also a big thanks to all of the applicants, as we received almost 400 applications from 28 countries, indicating quite an interest in the EU-ASEAN relationship. As you have said, Shada, this forum takes place in a special year for two reasons. First, it's a big year for EU and ASEAN. We celebrate 45 years of our dialogue partnership. And over these years, the partnership has grown into a very dense relationship. That includes a robust trade partnership. We are each other's third trade partner, a long-standing development partnership. The EU is ASEAN's biggest cooperation partner, and a very comprehensive, I'd say, technical partnership with 20 different sectoral dialogues on environment, climate change, trade, science, research, maritime security, you name it. But beneath that dense network of engagement is a joint belief in something fundamental. That's a cooperative global order. That's multilateralism. And it are these very core values of international politics that are under attack in today's world, in the Indo-Pacific, but also on the European continent. Now, 45 years after its creation, the EU and ASEAN partnership has therefore lost nothing of its relevance, but we should dare asking the tough questions and challenge ourselves on how we, the EU and ASEAN, can increase our impact together and make a difference in the years and decades to come. How can we contribute to each other's security, for example, in the South China Sea, but also in European waters? How can we jointly fight climate change without falling into reciprocal recriminations, but work together to boost clean energy or reduce deforestation? How can we promote multilateralism? We pride ourselves on being the two most successful examples of regional integration, which of course we are. But what can we learn from each other, and what lessons can we share with the rest of the world? And I can only encourage the young leaders of EU and ASEAN to ask these fundamental questions, but also to be daring, to be creative in providing answers. Throughout the year, there will be many webinars and training workshops culminating in the Youth Forum in October. And representatives of the young leaders will subsequently present the group's recommendations to heads of state and government at the EU-ASEAN 45th Anniversary Summit, late 2022. But I'd encourage all of you not to wait to make your voice heard. Do share your views and ideas throughout this year, and indeed beyond, as we would like to set in motion a process for the longer term. The second reason why 2020 is special is because we celebrate the Year of Youth, and many activities are being organized to bring young voices back to the center of our policies in actions. So too, when it comes to external policy, Commissioner Urpilainen has established a youth sounding board to engage young people, and has also appointed Kira Yusri as the new special advisor on youth. Now, Ms. Yusri is an ASEAN citizen. She's a Malaysian national, as a matter of fact, and I'm sure the youth leaders will interact with her as well. Finally, let me just say, my previous boss sometimes said that we should stop saying to young people that you are the future, because they're also the present. Now, that is, I'd say, even more true in ASEAN, where 65% of the population is under 65, under 35. So we look forward to engaging with you, young leaders, learning from you, and indeed shaping the EU-ASEAN partnership together with you. Thank you, Shara.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for talking about the multifaceted relationship, and an important point you've made, Ambassador, that young people are actually our present, not just our future. We've talked about sharing lessons, you've talked about being daring and creative, and above all, of making young people's voice heard. Thank you very much for those inspiring words. It's my pleasure now to give the floor to His Excellency Dato Jock, who is, of course, the ASEAN Secretary General. We have a video from him. Let's show the video now.
His Excellency Igor, Driesmans, Ambassadors of the European Union to ASEAN, Mrs. Federica Mogherini, Rector of the College of Europe, distinguished experts and panelists, our youth delegates, a very good morning. I'm pleased to have the opportunities to address you at this special event, the launch of the ASEAN EU Young Leaders Forum. As ASEAN and the EU have marked this year as the years of youth, I would like to use this opportunity to underscore our shared priority in enabling our youth to express the idea and play active roles in addressing regional and global concerns. Strengthening ties between the two regions is high on ASEAN agenda, especially as we transition into a post-pandemic world. ASEAN continues to undertake action as well as coordinate policies to recover better and stronger with our partners, including the EU. In addition to being the lead supporter of the COVAX facilities, the EU has also productively engaged in several experts' dialogues on pandemic-related mitigation efforts with the ASEAN since 2020. Distinguished delegates, this year's ASEAN-EU will commemorate the 45th anniversary of dialogues relations, and I'm pleased to note that our cooperation continues to flourish across all pillars. On the political security front, ASEAN and the EU regularly convene dialogues and consultation through the post-ministerial conference +1 sessions, as well as the ASEAN-EU ministerial and senior official meetings. The EU also actively participates in the ASEAN regional forums. Our strategic partnership is one that is based on shared value and common interests that underpin the comprehensive, dynamic, and multifaceted relations between ASEAN and the EU. I look forward to its advancement as well as the significant role played by both sides in the regional and global affairs. On the economic front, the EU is ASEAN's third largest trading partner and provider of external foreign direct investment in the region. The total bilateral merchandise trade between ASEAN and the EU reached $227 billion in 2020, amounting to 8.5% of the ASEAN's total merchandise trade, while the total FDI flows from the EU into ASEAN amounted to $10 billion. Moving forward, economic cooperation between ASEAN and EU would only be further enhanced through finalizing the framework to set out the perimeter for future ASEAN-EU free trade agreements remains our priority. I believe that the ASEAN-EU FTA could help anchor markets in both regions, particularly amidst the ongoing global supply chain disruption and geopolitical instability. Distinguished delegates, ASEAN is committed to equipping youth from across the region with the relevant skill to foster a future-ready generation that is creative, resilient, and able to thrive by the accelerated rate of digitalization. A key element to driving this is to encourage them to participate and contribute to policy making and community development. I'm pleased to note that throughout the programs, our youth delegates will touch upon a broad range of topics on existing as well as future cooperation between ASEAN and the EU. These include maintaining regional security, addressing climate change, as well as improving peoples-to-peoples connectivity throughout the EU Share program. I commend the organizing partner for realizing this important initiative and express my appreciation to the EU for the strong support rendered. To our youth delegates, I call on you to use these opportunities to empower yourself with knowledge, skills, and the spirit of collaboration in this diverse ecosystem. I'm confident that this forum will inspire you to collectively shape the ASEAN-EU cooperation in the years to come. And I look forward to your recommendation at the 45th EU-ASEAN Commemorative Summit in December this year. Thank you.
Secretary General, thank you very much indeed for that insightful address. And you talked about the free trade agreement that EU and ASEAN hope to sign, want to sign, and a message there to the young people here: empower yourself. Thank you very much. So now we had asked you this question: where are you joining us from? I'm here in Brussels. Igor Driesmans is in Jakarta. Hwee, our panelist, is in Singapore. Arum is in Jakarta, in Sumatra, and we have also people joining us from across Europe and Asia, ASEAN countries. So which city are you joining us from? Let's see the results. There you go. Singapore, Jakarta, Bangkok, Paris, London, Phnom Penh, Ghent, wonderful, Barcelona, Gothenburg, Hohenheim, Hong Kong, Malmö, Ghent again, Thailand, Zurich, Yogyakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Surabaya, Netherlands, not a city, but okay, I'll take it, Leiden, yes. This is Bruges, wonderful. That is fantastic. As I said, joining us from across ASEAN and across the European Union. Wonderful, stay with us. This is a very exciting and a very informative day as well. Thank you very much. We'll keep that slide for a second. It really is across our partnership, across Europe and ASEAN. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's move on. My great pleasure now is to introduce and give the floor, the screen, to Federica Mogherini, who is the Rector of the College of Europe. Ms. Mogherini does not need an introduction. She has been Rector of the College of Europe since September 2020. And of course, from 2014 to 2019, she was the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission. So Ms. Mogherini, the screen is yours.
My dear young leaders, it is a pleasure for me to be able to address you, even if virtually only. While a few years ago, I was so thrilled and excited to join the Young Leaders Forum of the EU-ASEAN in person, and that was a wonderful experience. Every time that I had the opportunity to meet young people in general, young leaders in general, and especially in regions like the ASEAN one, where the partnership with the European Union is so important, so strategically vital, it has been for me a boost. Always the best part of my journeys, always the best part of my visits. I've always invested very much in empowering young leaders to play the role. Often you will hear from politicians or for leaders that you are the future. My message to you is that you are the present already. You have a responsibility in leading the way, in contributing to the policies and the politics of not only your countries, but also international relations. And I think this is the reason why it is so important that the European Union and ASEAN provides the space for you, for the young leaders of the two regions to come together and shape the future, but also the present with their own ideas, with your own ideas and your own experiences. This is also why today I am the Rector of the College of Europe. an institute that focuses on European studies, empowering young people not only from Europe but also around the world to know how the European Union works, to be able to contribute to the policies and the politics, indeed, of the integration of the European continent. I believe that your role there is essential. I miss meeting with you in person a lot, but I know that there will be other opportunities in the future. And I really encourage you to dig deep in the EU-ASEAN relations. I think that especially in moments like this one, where the geopolitics of these times are leading the world into dangerous places, it is very important that young leaders of our regions focus their minds and their actions on how to build bridges, how to build dialogue, how to exchange positive practices, how to build a better present and future. So somehow, my message to you is this: you have already a responsibility. You already have a role to play, and I count personally very much on you to fulfill this task with people that will accompany you and support you. Always count on me to be there, and hope to see you very soon in person, either in one of the ASEAN countries or in Bruges at the College of Europe, or in Brussels, or in Europe, anywhere. But I'm sure that our paths will cross in the present and in the future again, because the Young Leaders Forum is always an excellent place to, as I said, empower people, empower you, the young leaders of today and of the future, and give you the instruments to make your dreams and ideas reality in your own way. So thank you again for hosting me, even if virtually. I wish you a very fruitful session. And again, apologies for not being interacting with you, but I am in Sofia, participating to a conference on the European Union and the Balkans, also quite important as a region for the European Union. And unfortunately, the sessions are coinciding in time. But looking forward to stay in touch, and have a great day.
Thank you indeed, Federica Mogherini, Rector of the College of Europe. Full disclosure, I teach EU-Asia relations at the College of Europe in Netherlands. So thank you very much indeed. There, Ms. Mogherini talking about the responsibility and the role of young people. So a very important question as well. Now, we're going to go into the panel discussion that we have envisaged for us to go deeper into some of the issues that have been raised by the keynote speaker and by our introductory speakers as well. But before we do that, we have another Slido question for you. We really want you to participate. I know interaction is difficult if we're in the online world, but we're trying our best, and you're doing really well as well. So Slido question number 3, before we go into our panel discussion, is also very simple, and it has to be said in one word. You're good at that. What does the ASEAN-EU partnership mean to you? What does this mean to you? Please explain in one word. Now, while you do that, I also want you to be listening very, very carefully, because we're going to start our panel discussion. And this discussion, as I said, goes into the nuts and bolts of how younger people can actually take part in this conversation, take on the role that Ms. Mogherini was talking about. And to explore this question further, we have a panel of 4 wonderful, brilliant experts. We have with us, staying with us, Ambassador Igor Driesmans, who I've introduced before. He's, of course, the EU ambassador to ASEAN and also special envoy for Myanmar. Joining us also from Singapore is Dr. Hwee. She's director of the European Union Center in Singapore and senior associate at Center for Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at NUS, the National University of Singapore. Arum Harahap is a doctoral candidate from Universitas Andalas in West Sumatra, Indonesia, and he's studying ecosystem services for local farmers and working as a project manager for Green Justice Indonesia. Thank you for joining us, Arum. And Dr. Julia Terkovic is the Assistant Director of the Center for Security, Diplomacy and Strategy of the Brussels School of Governance and Assistant Professor in International Affairs at the Brussels School of Governance as well. So as I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to delve deeper, find out a little bit more about these responsibilities and this role that Ms. Mogherini said young people should be playing today, not just tomorrow. And I'm going to kick off with you, Ambassador Driesmans. The question I have for you, and I think actually for all of the panelists, is to go into really the nuts and bolts of how this can be done. Why, first of all, why do we need to give a voice to young people? What can they bring to the table that we don't have at the moment? What do young people say that is different? What are the key issues that you want to discuss? Give us some of your concerns. And finally, I'd like you to be a little bit emotional and be quite personal. What gives you hope as a panelist, and what gives you pause for thought? So let's kick off this very important conversation. Igor Driesmans, Ambassador, let me go to you first.
Wow, that's quite a set of questions.
Yes, it is.
I think what let me start with the end of your question. I think what gives me hope is definitely the way young people can be and have been mobilized over the last couple of years on the issue of climate change, and I think that's exactly the voice that we need to hear in these current times. I think what is of concern, and it will not be a surprise to you, is the kind of aggression that we see in today's continent. I mean, the images that we see day in, day out on our TV screens of what's happening in Ukraine, and this kind of blatant aggression and violation of the UN Charter is something that I don't think I would have seen in my lifetime still happening so close to our homes. So I think that's the word of hope, the word of concern. Now, my expectation I outlined a little bit in the introduction, but I do hope that we can count on the youth to just walk a slightly different path than we diplomats usually do. And you know that we have very standard tracks and we have very standard procedures for just about anything, for having dialogue on this, on that. Sometimes we need to agree with many people before we can actually get something done. So I do hope that we get this kind of innovation and inspiration from the youth leaders going forward. Back to you, Shara.
Thank you very much, Igor. Climate change, and of course, this gives you, we're all coming together in this effort, I have to say, globally and across. Of course, it's a very vital component of our relationship, EU-ASEAN relationship. And of course, you've talked about the very dire geopolitical environment we live in. I think this should be a question that we should consider perhaps a little later in more depth, where we could be working together to try and change the dynamics of the global conversation that we have. Let me turn now to you, Aro, to get your reaction on the questions I've asked.
Thank you, Sada. Yeah, thank you, Sada. I think I will go first from the what give me pause for talks, because Igor already said from what gives him hopes. So, well, if you ask me what gives me hope in this current situation, I think nothing gives me hopes, but I choose to be hopeful. I choose to be hopeful because the evidence and the science are clear. We need a little more to say, let's join hands together to make a difference. I choose hopeful because young people like me are now united and join in the many movements, from eradicating poverty to sustainable technology. It is huge and it is hope. And if you also ask me, what gives you pause for talk, I think I cannot deny that change often takes a very long time. The current system does not immediately give young people power. The questions such as when will change come? What should we do to accelerate change? Not to mention the phenomenon of many organizations that only involve young people for a symbolic thing, or we call it tokenism, without actually including us in decision making to implementation. It is so sad, but it is true. Does give me pause for talk. And also through this forum, I think I hope that young people are truly empowered. We young people should be given a strong and equal role, space, and position to accelerate change through cooperative relation in the EU and ASEAN, because I think giving a voice to young people is a must, because history has proven that young people are agents of change. Like, let's say in Indonesia, the youth movement has become the motor for the liberation and renewal of the nation. I think, and I'm sure, it is the same in other Southeast Asian countries where we share a similar history and experience in the past. And over the past few years, I have spoken to world leaders about how important it is to include young people in the decision-making process to its implementation. I realized that any program to ensure a better future for young people must be relevant to our needs, including the ASEAN and EU relationships. The EU is one of the biggest investors in ASEAN. Given the youth voice in EU and ASEAN relations should be the main core of the program. It is important to import from this program to us to help us talk about what matter to us, design the future we want, and make decisions that affect our lives. Thank you. Back to you, Sada.
Thank you, Arom, making some very important points that I'll come back to you, Igor Driesmans, to take forward. I mean, he's talking about, and I think it's a concern that we do have, is about tokenism. It's about, talking about young people, but actually not including them in our conversations. So it's not a symbolic thing. It actually has to be very relevant, and their voice is important. And also young people as agents of change. I think I'd like you to give us a few examples of where you think this agency for change can become relevant in EU-ASEAN relations. And Arab also saying youth voice should be the main core of EU-ASEAN relations. I think we're trying hard. We're trying it also in ASEM, by the way, the Asia-Europe meetings, but maybe we should put more of a focus on that. I'll come back to you, Igor, so prepare yourself for these questions if you like. Julia, let's get your views on this. What gives you hope? What gives you pause for thought? And also, why, Julia, do you think it's important to bring the voice of young people into this conversation? Before you reply, Julia, let me just make an appeal to all our young leaders watching and listening. Please do start sending your questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box, sorry, and if you're on Facebook, in the comment box. So I'm happy to take your questions and put them to our panelists. Julia, screen's yours.
Thank you, Shada. Thank you very much. And let me start by saying that it's great to be here today. 3 years ago, like Federica Mogherini, I was sitting on the other side. I was one of the selected young leaders. And so it is really great to see this initiative growing. And this is indeed probably the first sign of hope, I would say. So let's say also to respond a bit to your maybe Slido question. I think to me, EU and ASEAN partnership really represent real commitment to regional integration, but also multilateralism. More than that, now with EU renewed interest in the Indo-Pacific, I believe that ASEAN also represents really a pragmatic choice for the EU in a context where we see a rivalry between US and China growing. The EU-ASEAN partnership really provides a multipolar alternative to a bipolar world, and this is really important. Is not easy, I think, from the two regional, from a regional organization perspective. It is a daily commitment from these two organizations that are facing constant internal and external issues. But even if the context, let's say, looks more and more challenging, I think the EU and ASEAN have the potentials to really shape this bipolar narrative. And I think there is where really young leaders can have a role, can really help shaping this narrative. Very often, and I remember we were discussing this 3 years ago as well, we say that EU and ASEAN should continue investing in what sometimes is defined as the lowest common denominator, a definition that I do not really share in a sense. But that is in fact very practical cooperation. I'm sure we will discuss this later on as well, but I think there is really space for young people to contribute to initiatives that really that are really important for the security, broadly understood, of EU and ASEAN citizens. And all this little step, in a sense, should be an important element for the partnership. And I think this is really where young leaders, young people can contribute already today to make these small steps. Very often, EU and ASEAN partnership is seen with some frustrations because it's not moving very fast, because it's not moving in the direction we would like to see it. But I think we should also appreciate the incredible progress that has been made so far. I feel young people contributed to some of this progress, and the today event is one good example, I would say. For the future, I think it's important to continue involving young leaders as really like one of the important elements of this partnership in several ways, I think. I think it's good to have events like this where people can meet, can exchange. At the same time, I also, and maybe this is also important because of my experience, I think it's important really to learn the different processes, because it's a great way to understand the other institutions. So there are a lot of initiatives at EU level in terms of, for example, EU simulation that really helps young people understand the complex machine that EU is. So I think for the future, for really empower young people, would be good to support them in learning these complex machines, because if you understand those, then you will really have the possibility to further shape the way in which policy are decided and are then implemented at in both regions, let's say. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Julia. Talking about the pragmatic relationship, moving from bipolar, binary choices to multipolar alternatives, shaping the practical cooperation. And talking about practical cooperation, I just give you a few questions that are coming in, and before I turn to Hwee. So one of the questions that come in, and I'd like you to sort of come to them in the second round. What is the panel's perception of ASEAN youth readiness to be the drivers of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? Very important point on the SDGs. One other question is, in what way and to what extent can youth participate meaningfully in today's pressing issues such as energy justice? Also extremely important, especially today, these days when energy prices are rising, and we're going to see energy shortages and of course hike in prices of oil and gas and our heating and our cooking, of course. What are the steps, the first steps that young people can undertake to pave the way to a better future? That's a more general question, but just keep these in mind when I come to you for the second round. Hwee, your turn now to give us your insights into how you think young people can become part of this conversation, but also what they bring to the table. Screen's yours.
Thank you, Shada, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to participate in this. Very good morning and good afternoon to all of you. I was told by my students in university that nowadays when we start any conference, we are not allowed to say good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, because it's too binary. So just based on that, I thought I would perhaps start with one of the questions that you asked about what gives me pause for thought on EU-ASEAN relations. And I hope to go to something more hopeful after that. I was also thinking when the first question was asked about how do you feel today or something along that line. I didn't see anyone. Everyone was excited, which is good, but no one was depressed. But I'm a little depressed because of what Ambassador Igor has also alluded to about the situation in Europe with the war in Ukraine. And I think that gives us pause for thought that perhaps we have been talking a lot about dialogue and conversations, but what I'm feeling a bit depressed in some ways that sometimes maybe it's a dialogue of the deaf. Okay? I think Joseph Borrell used that term after the EU-China summit. And I always wonder whether when we dialogue, whether we only want to talk and react, or do we really listen? Because I think a lot of the mess we see in the world now is perhaps because we do not listen enough. We have our narratives, we start to believe in our own narratives, and we do not truly understand the perspectives and viewpoints of others that are shaped by their history and their geographical realities. So my thought about this is about, when we talk about EU-ASEAN relations, I'm happy that we have progressed so far. I think it has been a long-standing partnership. The EU-ASEAN relations have gone through various so-called crises, if you may use the term, of ups and downs. But I think we have gone from what I think Shada used, a transactional kind of relationship to one that's more strategic and more comprehensive. We are now really serious about engaging each other. But I just hope that the war in Ukraine will not take us back to a time when again we see relationship in the binary, in a kind of very binary, and only through one lens, right? I think I used the term before in one of the articles I wrote that fall into what I call a singularity trap, allowing one event to sort of overshadow everything we are doing and looking everything through one lens, or through a very binary autocracies against democracy kind of framework. And that we'll continue to engage each other based on our own merit, and not let, for instance, whether it's Russia, EU rivalry or Sino-US rivalry define our partnership. So I think that was the pause I should, or at least the. But what gives me hope, as I said, is that I think we have a long-standing partnership that has withstood many crises, and I think we have. I would actually confidently say that we are now at a very resilient phase of our partnership, right? And we'll continue to engage. I think we are beginning to understand each other a bit better every day, and hence better able to manage our differences and find convergence as much as possible. So I think hopefully based on that, our relations will strengthen, and we will be able to work together to navigate an increasingly complex and volatile international environment. On why involved views, I think, again, just following on what Ambassador Igor has said, I think we need to let the youth be the pathfinders, right? People like us who have been in the, like I said, we may, it's harder for us who have been working on these issues, for instance, to maybe get out of certain mindset or a framework that we already have. So hopefully with the youth being much more involved, they can be the pathfinders and the agents of change. And as what Julia also said, help perhaps shape a different narrative moving forward. So I'll just end there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hwee, for those very thoughtful words. Hwee and I often work together on these issues and have actually published together as well. So a lot of what you've said, Hwee, resonates very strongly with me as well, because I do believe that we do not live in a world of binary choices. We live in a very complex and complicated world. I sometimes say it's a mix and match world, where countries look after their interests and their values according to their own national priorities. And of course, this relationship, EU-ASEAN relationship, all of us have seen it go and change and progress from transactional, as you said, focus on trade and economics, into this multifaceted and very fascinating conversation that Igor has talked about, which covers so many old and emerging issues. So thank you very much indeed for those thoughtful words. If I could ask Lily now to show us the results of our Slido question So we're turning to you, and thank you also for your questions. They're coming in fast and strong, and I'm going to put them to the panelists. So the question was, what does this mean for you? And okay, connectivity, opportunity, it means the future, it means peace, it means cooperation, collaboration, empowerment, prosperity, and diversity, multilateralism, progress, action. So connectivity wins in the poll, and peace comes there too, and of course multilateralism. So many of the buzzwords and many of the significant words that we've been using here as well. So thank you very much indeed, all of you, for being so active on Slido as well. Let's now let's now go to our fourth question before I start the second round with our panelists. And the fourth Slido question for all of you is, which issue do you feel takes highest precedence over the next 12 to 18 months between the EU and ASEAN? And we give you here multiple choice. The first is it the political perspective, including democratic governance, human rights and basic rights? Defense and security, that's choice number 2. Economic perspective, healthcare, including COVID-19 mitigation and a health partnership, which is being talked about, which I think is actually in force, if I'm not mistaken. SDGs and climate change, people-to-people connectivity, including education and cultural exchanges, and intergovernmental policy and relations. So there is a ranking formula here, and as always, we will share the Slido results later. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to this very, very insightful panel now. I'll come back to you, Ambassador Driesmans, to comment on some of the very important issues that have been raised first by our panelists. You've heard all 3 of them coming forward with some very interesting and, I have to say, adventurous ideas about this relationship, and then also to what has come in about the SDGs, about energy justice, and there are questions coming in hard and strong. So I'll leave you with these thoughts for the moment. Igor, please, screen is yours.
Right, maybe I could pick up where we left it in terms of the potential for kind of getting into a world with two opposing sides, or even to get EU and ASEAN to be on 2 different sides when it comes to the current Russian aggression in Ukraine. I think, first of all, of course, this is a defining moment for Europe in many ways in terms of the security threats that we see today. But I would not articulate the current war in terms of, say, democracies versus autocracies, or even an issue between Russia and Ukraine, although of course that is also part of the story. But I think for us, it is really about some basic respect for international law and the UN Charter. And in that respect, I think both EU and ASEAN, we should, or we will be, and even we have been all on the same side when we look at the UN General Assembly votes. But sitting here in Jakarta, I will agree that sometimes the way that the current war is being portrayed is sometimes slightly different when you read an ASEAN newspaper or indeed a European one. So I think it's what we talked about in terms of listening to each other, this kind of dialogue that we also on this, as I said, defining issue for us, that we just need to continue the conversation at all possible levels. On your issues in terms of sustainability and the questions that were asked for when it comes to energy, justice and sustainability, I think in a way probably there isn't that much of a difference between the ASEAN youth and the EU youth, but they will they can of course speak for themselves, but the way I would sense is that they would have issues in common and interests in common. if you see that many countries within ASEAN, but also within the EU, keep subsidizing fossil fuels, that is, of course, an issue that matters as much for a young Indonesian as it matters for a young German or young Italian. The questions that are raised now when it comes to the results of the Russian aggression on energy justice, as it was put, and the price hike, which is again something that the youngsters from the two sides of the globe have in common. So I think I'd be just very keen to listen to them on this issue, but on all of these issues. What are your expectations to the ASEAN? What are your expectations for the EU? We see that in general the trust level is high, but what exactly is it that you would have as wishes for Europe to do? And I suppose vice versa for Europeans. What are your expectations for ASEAN? And I think it's definitely my commitment that we will not only listen, but also try as much as possible to act upon those recommendations. We spoke about the recommendations for the summit, but I do hope that we can also multiply this across the entire relationship. If we have, say, we hope to have an EU-ASEAN environment ministerial meeting in the course of this year. Can the youth come forward with suggestions for both sides to take on? Same on the economic side, and so on and so forth. So I'd really like this to become part and parcel of the entire spectrum of the relationship.
Right. Igor, so this is, thank you very much indeed, Igor. So you saw also that the response of many of our participants was about the importance and what does this mean for them? And they pointed to connectivity as being a very important, let's say, trademark of EU-ASEAN relations. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, do you think?
Sure. I mean, it's an issue that was already very important for EU and ASEAN, but I suppose with the economic recovery that is both awaiting us, or that has started, but also with the new policies that the EU has adopted, think about Global Gateway, it will become only more important. And that is basically two parts. One is supporting each other's connectivity. For example, from where I'm sitting, what can we do to bring more people to people connectivity within ASEAN or infrastructure within ASEAN? That's the first leg. But secondly, how can we bring Europe and ASEAN closer together? There, I should mention the Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement, which we are about to sign, but also student mobility, which we hope to give another boost. And of course, digital connectivity, which is one of these areas where, again, we need young voices to make us understand and also think ahead for a few years. What do you think about the issues of data protection? Is it really an issue for you and for EU-ASEAN to tackle, and so on and so forth?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much indeed, Igor. Let me turn now to you, Arum. The two questions that I think are very relevant to the work you're doing in the climate field. One is, of course, about how young people can be drivers for change in achieving the SDGs. I think, we're moving faster ahead than we did for the Millennium Goals, but still there's a lot of work to be done. And we risk lagging behind. So that, and then also the question of energy justice. I think you're well qualified to speak on both these issues. So, the screen's yours, Arum.
Thank you, moderator. I think I would like to back to the term of connectivity because it is important. Like last year, I joined the Europe Development Days panel with the Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen, and really learned about the EU that launched the EU Green Deals. It's like 1 billion euro to combat the climate change. So back to your question, how young people can achieving SDGs, I would like to talk on behalf of the local youth or indigenous youth, because it is very important that if we want to combat the climate change, based on the natural-based solution, we need to strengthen the role of the indigenous people, indigenous communities, especially the youths. So I think it is important to ensure the EU-ASEAN relationship to strengthen the community, to strengthen the indigenous communities and mobilizing the finance, the funding into the local level, into the community level. How can we ensure that? I think it's one of the questions that we need to keep in mind, because most of the climate finance is always, take attention only on the policy level, government level. How can we ensure the finance and the funding into the community level? Because the community is the pioneer. They are the core to combating the climate change. And in Southeast Asian countries, we are one of the regions, the most high-risk region in the world. One of the most high-risk region in the world, according to the IPCC report. So this is very important, the cooperation within the EU and ASEAN, combating the climate change through the EU Green Deals. And also to your question about how the energy justice, I think Igor and also Leo already talked about the Ukraine and Russia issue right now, but I think also it is important for us to keep in mind about the renewable energy issues in Southeast Asia. A lot of problems with the indigenous rights and with their displacing from their lands, and also we cannot deny that the palm oil issue is still a big issue right now between the Malaysia, Indonesia, and the EU countries. So through the EU relationship with also the green deals and energy justice, how can we make sure we can achieve a better cooperation and also a green cooperation between these two regions? Thank you, Sada.
Arum, just to take that forward a tiny bit, because I remember your conversation at the EDDs last year on indigenous, and climate justice is also an issue that you were talking about. So I was wondering if you could give your own ideas about how we could take this conversation forward. You said more green cooperation between the EU and ASEAN. Do you have some idea about where we could really improve this?
Yeah, I think I would try to speak from the community level, on the village level, let's say on the local level. So the EU Green Deal, the EU has a policy, has an initiative to launch the EU Green Deal. How can we make sure, how do we have a platform, let's say, to mobilizing the finance, the funding into the community level, and of course, the community, the youth is part of the community. So indigenous people, local youth, can we have one platform or like one initiative to bringing the funding, to mobilize the funding from the EU to the community level? Of course, make the youth as the, from the signing, implementation, make the youth role as the main core of the program. I think it's one of the biggest important thing for us, because if we want to combat the climate change through the natural-based solutions, of course, the renewable energy is also interconnected with the natural resources. We have to bring the youth at the core of the program, and then strengthen them by mobilizing the funding and also the climate finance. I think it's really important. Thank you, Sada.
Thank you very much, Arum. So, Julia, let's go to you, and let's get your ideas on some of the issues that have been raised by other panelists, but also by the questions that are coming in. And there are some very interesting questions that I have to put to you in the third round. So, screen's yours, Julia, for the moment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Shada. I think there is one element that I would like to comment, maybe more than others. I mean, we already discussed sustainable development goals, energy justice, and but there is one element about connectivity that I think it's important. As you said, it's a buzzword. It's used very often, but I think, at least is in my view, and it would be great to hear from young leaders what they think. Connectivity, in my view, should not only be seen as an endpoint. It's also a mean to achieve something concrete. So I think one of the questions you raised was also, what can young leaders do? What are the next steps, let's say? So I think connectivity is great, and here I'm not talking about infrastructural connectivity and so on, but really people-to-people connectivity. I think it's great, it's important, but it's an instrument. It should be an instrument to achieve something more concrete, I would say. So in terms of what young leaders can do, again, I think for them would be important to connect for sure, but then also to be bold and try to come up with concrete ideas based on their experience. Because what I saw when I joined 3 years ago was really that there is a lot of experience around the table, real experience in terms of concrete policies, climate change, ocean governance. So would be good, and this is really like a call for the young leader to trust their experience and really come up with original idea and use this possibility to connect, in a sense that they should really exchange and see and challenge their own idea. But yeah, and maybe I'll close it here. I think it's important they trust their experience. So not connectivity just as connecting with people, but also really to test original ideas and yeah, to then come up with something concrete.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much indeed, Julia. Hwee.
Yes, what questions do you have for me?
So there's a very interesting question that I think is right up your street, Hwee. How can we improve the visibility of the EU in ASEAN and ASEAN in the EU? I'm also going to ask Igor that question, of course, and he's smiling already. But you and I have worked a lot on these issues, so let's hear from you.
Okay, I think perhaps I may use this to make a little sort of a promotion. So in order to have a better visibility, I think, and to me that is a challenge, right? Because ASEAN, as we know, is a very different organization than the EU. It's intergovernmental in structure. So the visibility of ASEAN, for instance, in Brussels, it's not very prominent. You would see the Singapore embassy, the Indonesian, the Vietnamese. Although there's an ASEAN Brussels committee, I think there's still it's still not so visible, right? So the possibility of ASEAN sort of dropping off the radar scope of EU is always there, and especially when the EU is so consumed with events like in Ukraine and all that. So in order to have a better visibility for ASEAN in the EU context, some friends and I have talk about starting this ASEAN Chamber of Commerce, because I think it's true. Again, we talk about concrete projects that can benefit people, and in terms of we are especially facing very challenging economic times with fear of deglobalization or bifurcation of the global economy. We're in this context where Dato Lim talked about the global supply chains. So I think increasing the connectivity of businesses, trying to raise the visibility to organizations like the ASEAN Chamber of Commerce that will try and do more in Brussels to raise the importance of economic ties, strengthening economic ties between commercial and economic ties between EU and ASEAN, I think is one channel. I also think that what we can do is perhaps to promote some sort of EU-ASEAN friendship societies in universities, in both universities in Europe and in Southeast Asia. So again, now that we have young people amongst us, we hope that they will take up this initiative. We know that there are some young people who have already gone ahead, for instance, and both Shada and I are in their advisory board. The student think tank on Asia-Europe relations STEER, and they're doing quite a lot of taking on that own initiatives to promote more dialogue and more exchange between Asia and Europe. So I think this kind of student initiatives where we talk about the young leaders being involved, I think are important. So those of you who have connections with universities, I think you should encourage the kind of EU-ASEAN friendship societies or communities in your respective universities. The other thing I thought that we should perhaps think about we know the EU has, of course, we have Igor, who is doing a great job on EU-ASEAN relations, but EU also likes to have now a special envoy. So Igor is now the special envoy on Myanmar. We have a special EU special envoy on the Indo-Pacific. Perhaps what we could think about is also a, what they call a special envoy or special coordinator for EU-ASEAN affairs, where they could sort of work across different ministries, right? Foreign affairs, trade, education, culture, in order to create more buzz with regards to EU-ASEAN relations, have a more strategic overview of how the relationship can develop and where are the areas that are lacking that needs more attention. So these are just some ideas that I can throw up on the raising the visibility of EU-ASEAN partnership.
Thank you very much, Hwee. In fact, in Europe now, of course, all ASEAN member states embassies fly the ASEAN flag as well, which has been going on for some years. So that's also a good development. And I've seen quite a lot of engagement that ASEAN ambassadors are now undertaking with journalists, with think tanks. Of course, there's still a long way to go, but I think there is an uptick in their realization of public diplomacy and even digital diplomacy, if you like, using social media more actively. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to turn to Igor in a minute, but let's see the results of our Slido question, which was about the ranking of questions and issues of importance to our young leaders and others who are participating in this wonderful conference. Do we have the results that we can show now? Right. Great. Sustainable development and climate change get the first, and not surprisingly, first priority. Political perspective, including democratic governments, is number 2. And number 3, but almost number 2, also is the economic perspective. And of course, we've talked about supply chains, we've talked about an EU-ASEAN free trade agreement, investments, of course, very important. Number 4 is healthcare, also very, very high on people's agenda. And people-to-people connectivity, including education, is number 5. On my screen, I can't see how it ranks with the others, but it's there as well. So SDGs and climate change really gets the top marks from our young, youthful participants and everyone else joining us as well. And then human rights comes number 2 along, yes, really along with the economic perspective. Right, Igor, food for thought. I'm giving you just a second to think, but knowing you, I know you have some comments on these issues, but also if you could comment, everyone actually, on this, but also let's launch this, we still have a lot of time on our hands, but let's launch, if you like, the 5th question as well, and we give people time to think about it. What has this event meant for you? But before that, let's turn to Igor Driesmans. Igor, comment if you like on this, but also the question of visibility. I know you're very visible in Jakarta and across ASEAN, but perhaps there is more to be done in terms of the EU collectively becoming more of an actor and more of a visible actor, if I could say so, in ASEAN states. Screen is yours.
Thank you, Shada. And I mean, of course, I normally when I get that question, I always start with lowering slightly the expectations, because the first job is, of course, for both EU and ASEAN to communicate about what EU is to the European audience, and to communicate what ASEAN is to the ASEAN audience. And I think you'd be surprised in both cases how little people know about what our respective regional organizations do, let alone about how we work, our institutions, and so on and so forth. But definitely there is enormous scope for doing better. So I will, Shada, follow Hwee's example and make a little promo because we do celebrate 45 years of dialogue partnership, and we will celebrate that with a number of activities where we hope to reach out to a different type of audience, not only the boring bureaucrats and officials, but we will do a higher education fair. We will do a bike ride in all of the ASEAN capitals. We will do a cultural festival, a photo exhibition, a cookbook, and yes, also a comic strip. So of course, we don't do that just because we like comic strips, which of course we also do, but to promote also some of our cooperation and our agenda. So we would invite people to write and make suggestions about, be it sustainable development, be it about connectivity, and so on and so forth. So that would be a way to reach out to different types of audiences within ASEAN. But apart from that, of course, we will need to keep putting an emphasis on the kind of political attention that is needed from both sides to keep this partnership going forward. And in that sense, we will have a rather unprecedented summit this year, where all of our heads of state and government from both sides will meet to not just celebrate 45 years anniversary, but also kind of chart the way forward. And as to the current poll that was asked, what is the issue that takes highest precedence between EU and ASEAN on sustainable development and climate change, was the main answer. I think I couldn't agree more. That's really where we together will need to make a difference, and quickly.
Right, Igor. Two questions that I think are relevant for you. One is, well, first of all, defense and security are not in the ranking of the 5 top that I see here. So a quick comment from you on that. And then how does the question in from participants, how does the EU cooperate with ASEAN in conflict prevention and resolution, namely in Myanmar? So something that's very relevant to you. Would you like to just quickly comment on both of those questions, please?
Sure. Well, on the first point, security has been a rapidly growing area of cooperation and dialogue between both sides. Of course, there is the ASEAN architecture, and notably the ARF, the ASEAN Regional Forum, in which a lot of these security issues are discussed. But we've also stepped up our bilateral dialogue and cooperation on cyber issues, on maritime security, and so on and so forth. On Myanmar, I think ASEAN has taken the lead with convening in Jakarta just over a year ago a summit, crafting a 5-point consensus, and appointing the ASEAN Special Envoy, currently the Deputy Prime Minister of Cambodia. And the 5-point consensus is now basically the kind of guiding document for the entire international community. It is UN Security Council language. So in that sense, ASEAN has really taken the lead, but I think for the EU, this is such an important issue that we're very closely coordinating on anything we do with ASEAN, and see how we can contribute to the ASEAN 5-point consensus on the cessation of violence, on the provision of humanitarian aid, on creating this dialogue between all parties, which is exactly what the 5-point consensus says. So a lot of work to be done for sure, because we haven't seen the Myanmar junta being very forthcoming with applying the 5-point consensus. So a lot of work to do.
Right, a lot of sleep lost, as I imagine, as well. So multitasking as ever, Igor. Thank you very much for that. Arun, let's turn to you. First of all, you should be quite heartened by the poll results. Sustainable development and climate change come first, which is also obviously your priority. And then there are some questions here that I'd like to also put to you. So one of the, I think, relevant questions for you, given the work you do, is how can we reach young people outside the bubble to make meetings like this and youth engagement in general more inclusive for people without access to education or the internet? And also the question really is about resources for young people. I think you mentioned it as well, but if you could come back to that. Thank you. And please join it at Slido for this one question that you have to answer. I think it's the last one. Describe in one word what you have learned from this event. So go for that, and let's listen to Arun, please.
Thank you, Sada. I'm so happy to see the poll before that, the sustainable development and climate change, the highest priority by all the audience. Yeah, back to your question, how can we reach out the young people, especially when the youth lack of the internet access, lack of the education. I think when they have lack of education access, what we can do first is how can we provide them? How can we strengthen the youth capability? So I think the EU and ASEAN, it could be good collaborating also for between the EU youth and EU-ASEAN. How can we connect again to the connectivity to see where the youth from the EU and the ASEAN collaborate together, especially for the local youth or indigenous youth. They can have how to say, transfer knowledge, like the EU from the modern knowledge, and also the local youth, they have indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge. How can we find the middle ground of these two knowledge to save our traditional? I know when we say the indigenous people or local people or the youth in the rural area, sometimes we always see them as a lack of this, lack of that, but we can see them have the tool, they have a power, they have a traditional knowledge. How can we bring it to the implementation of the program? How can we combine it to the modern knowledge, modern skills? I think it's very important to assess, to analyze this. What can the local youth, what can we improve from the local youth? They're strong. How can we strengthen it more? And if you ask me, how can we reach out them? I think the first thing that we can do is provide them the skills and knowledge they need, and then we should listen to the traditional perspective and traditional knowledge. So I think that's from me. Back to you.
Thank you, Arun. Indeed, at the when I was moderating the event on indigenous people at the EDDs last year, I think what I discovered, really, I have to confess, was how they are the unsung heroes of sustainable development, that they have a wealth of knowledge and information and tools that we sometimes ignore, much to our own detriment. And of course, people like you are bringing that question forward, and we should be listening much more than we have done so far. So thank you very much indeed, Arun, for pointing that out. Julia, let's go to you. First of all, reaction to what you've seen in the poll. Are you surprised by any of the results, or do you think it's par for the course? This is where our relationship is and should be. And also the question about how do we take this conversation? You've taken part in other youth leadership forums. How do we take this conversation outside the bubble to propagate and disseminate what is happening within our dialogue? Please.
Yes, thank you. I was surprised. Yes and no. Let's say that I was expecting health to be a bit higher in the ranking for the simple reason that I think very often, let's say, a crisis like the one we faced could be also an opportunity to strengthen the relationship. So I would say this is an area where I would see some development in the next years. It's an area where we have experiences and we saw also the shortcomings. So it's an area where we definitely need to invest probably a little bit more. Another area is security, of course, but also non-traditional security elements. I've spent quite some time exploring EU-ASEAN cooperation on disaster management. That is not very popular nowadays because fortunately we don't have that, disasters that are as bad as a few years ago, but it's still an area that is very important for both regions. I mean, both regions are still facing quite big disasters, so that would be also an area where I would see further cooperation. Of course, climate change is a priority, should be a priority, and I see why it's a priority for young people. So I'm a bit surprised, but not that much. Then, of course, it's also important to see what the background of the leaders joining is. Of course, they might feel that they can contribute more in those areas, and that is absolutely great. So I'm sure we will have. We would read great recommendations, and this will be really welcome, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to just to say how to move this to the next level. I very much agree that we should go out from the city, let's say, and try to reach also other areas that are not reached that much with initiatives and so on. Of course, if you live in a capital, it's much easier than if you live outside the bubble, let's say. At the same time, and thanks to the COVID pandemic, we discovered that we have different means that we can use to better connect. It's easy, it's cheap, and so it's feasible. So I think this would really be a game changer in terms of youth involvement. And I'll stop it here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julia. So, Hwee, going to you, I think there's one question here that's very, very relevant to what you said. So the question is, how can youth be encouraged to continue taking action and I guess keeping their hopes high amidst the risks of dejection and apathy? I think this is a very relevant question to the times we live in. There is a tendency perhaps in among some people to say this is getting so bad, so tough, so complicated, let me just sit at home and stay out of the turmoil. Hwee.
Right. I suppose you need sort of encouragement. I mean, as a lecturer, for instance, I think perhaps teachers, lecturers, and all that have that extra responsibility to really encourage and empower the young people, right, to be much more forward-looking, much more to encourage them to take initiative. And I think, of course, governments can also be involved in terms of I just give an example in Singapore where you have the youth councils or the government putting in fundings to encourage young people to come up with ideas, and they and provide seed funding for them to operationalize and get to translate the ideas into reality. So these are things that can be done in some way through a lot of private public partnership. Also corporations, I think, should be encouraged to do that kind of work. Companies where they could engage youths and young people again through funding, through all these different programs to encourage young people to really take action and not just get despondent or just with ideas that they cannot really have the funding or the seed funding to at least to try it out and translate those ideas into some concrete projects or realize their the ideas into reality. So I think that these are ways we can think about. On the poll, on the sustainable development and climate change, of course, is understand. And I think we really need to also now broaden these issues and take into account what is happening in Ukraine in terms of the how that is going to affect, for instance, food security. And of course, we know the inflation caused by the fuel, with the supply shortage on oil and gas, and how to turn this into an opportunity in terms of green transition. So I hope that the young leaders will really also look at the sustainable development and climate change into broader context and taking into account what is happening in Ukraine. For instance, I think, if I'm not wrong, EU has started some program to help on farming issues. And I think sustainable farming, how do we encourage and really work together to work on issues like sustainable farming, sustainable fisheries, and all that will become a very much more, a component of this whole idea about sustainable, and not just about climate and environment, but really sustainable development in terms of the kind of innovations in the farming industry, in agri-tech, and how this can be much more shared with technology transfer to allow more, the agri-tech to take over to make sure that there is less food insecurity and issues like that. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Hwee, as well. Now I'm going to start a final round, which is going to be very quick. But before we do that, can we see the results of this Slido question that we asked our participants? What we have learned from this event. We've learned about connectivity, the word keeps coming up, opportunities, priorities. We've learned about hope. So Hwee, our message is getting through. Stimulation, expectation, sustainability, future, exchange of knowledge, and hope, again, inclusion, energetic, potential, partnership, education, and collaboration, inspiration. Thank you for that. So final question to all of you, and you really have to answer within 30 seconds. Now, I know we don't live in a perfect world, but if all four of you, we did live in a perfect world, and everything that we wanted did happen, did materialize. What is the one wish you would have, Igor, for the Young Leaders Forum going forward? And to all three of you also the same. What is the one thing that you think the YLF can achieve in the coming year? There you go, Igor.
Small task. Yeah, I think the one word I'd be looking for is innovation. I'd like the young people to just think outside of the box and provide, walk a different path than officials and the others, and come with new, fresh ideas. Would be something I'd be really looking forward to read.
Walk a different path, right? Not make the same mistakes that we've been making, and looking at more creativity. Thank you very much, Igor. That's very frank and very, very refreshing. Thank you for that. And let's go to Aram, please.
I think for me, social power. What I think important for us in this current system, also the COVID pandemic already shown us that we cannot rely on individual things. We have to unite in social power, and also with the globalization, we need to keep asking, and also keep in mind that we are human and we rely on the social things. And then what things that we do are impacting to other people. So I think the social power is thing that I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. 30 seconds, no more.
Yes, sure. I like leadership and homeworks as well. I think the two really work well together. I think it's important that young leaders will take leadership in the next years, but it's also important to do homeworks in order then to be ready and to be prepared. So yeah, these two combined, I would say. I would also maybe call for a bit less pressure. So take your time to learn, the policies, take your time to learn ASEAN or the EU if you don't feel that you know enough. So take your time, don't feel pressure, because if you take time, if you study, if you learn, then solution and innovation will come.
Okay, thank you very much. Hwee.
I would like to tell the young leaders to be kind, build empathy and trust, which is very much needed if we want to move forward together as a human species.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much to the panelists for this fascinating conversation, also very informative and educational as well. So thank you very much for your advice. Also to all of you, thank you very much for your questions. They've helped me as moderator to take this conversation forward. I've really enjoyed it as well. So before we end, I have a few housekeeping rules, but also some information to share with you. But I think the best thing now is also to perhaps take a family photo. Can the organizers prepare for the family photo while I give the needed information? So selected young leaders are invited to meet on May the 10th at 9:30 Central European Time for an online informative meeting. I think further information will be sent to you. The opening event of the Young Leaders Forum is on October the 4th. It's open to the public and will be online and hybrid in various venues in the EU and in ASEAN. Now, there will be more EU-ASEAN activities open to all as we commemorate the EU-ASEAN 45th anniversary this year. Igor Driesmans, the ambassador, has talked about some of them. The important ones, of course, is the EU-ASEAN Higher Education Fair, which is on August 6th, and the ASEAN-EU Cultural Festival, which is on the second half of September. So keep in touch with us, follow us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and also on this website from Shada Islam. I have to say it's been a very, very delightful and very informative conversation that I've had with our panelists. The whole morning has been exciting, and I think all of the questions we've talked about of partnership, collaboration, cooperation go to the heart of the EU-ASEAN relationship and really will help make this world a better place. That's my really heartfelt prayer and thought and hope for the future. Now, can we have that family photo? I think we need to turn our cameras on and we have to smile. Thank you very much indeed. See you soon again. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.